MzeroA Nation, do you know the differences between Class Bravo and Class Charlie airspace? What's going on, MzeroA Nation? Matthew and Jamie here, and today we're breaking down the differences between Class Bravo and Class Charlie.
First up, size and structure. When we think of Bravo, we think busy. Think of it like an upside-down wedding cake with multiple layers that expand as altitude increases. It surrounds major airports like LAX, JFK, and Atlanta.
Yeah, and what's really important to know is all these metros that these Bravos go over, they're all very different. So each Bravo is going to look very different. For example, the one over New York and LaGuardia.
Yeah, you brought that up, yeah.
That's going to be completely different than Atlanta, for example.
Oh, yes.
They all have to be custom fitted for these huge metropolitans.
Yeah.
Now, contrary to that, Class Charlie is smaller and less congested, typically. However, there are Charlies that are pretty busy. It has just two layers, an inner core and then an outer shelf. And it surrounds busy regional airports like Daytona Beach and Columbus, Ohio. If you think of that Class Bravo as a wedding cake, I like to think of Class Charlie as that two-layered birthday cake just flipped right upside down.
Matthew, I'm sure you've flown in and out of Atlanta just as well as me. I fly in and out of Atlanta pretty regularly, and you go fly in and out of Atlanta, it is so busy. It is just, it's obviously the biggest, busiest airport in the world, but you go out to a little Class Charlie, I say little, it's still busy, but Myrtle Beach, for example, that's one where it may have less airline traffic, but more general aviation traffic to see. Another big difference between Bravo and Charlie is the altitude dimensions. Class Bravo airspace usually extends from the surface up to 10,000 feet MSL, sometimes even higher depending on the airport. Class Charlie, however, only extends to 4,000 feet above ground level. So if you're flying VFR and trying to avoid controlled airspace, Class Bravo requires a lot more vertical planning.
And I really like what you said about usually the Bravo goes up to 10,000 feet.
Right.
It doesn't always, and it's really important to remember that when we're doing our flight planning. Always, 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 when you're flight planning, double check what the sectional chart says about altitudes regarding the Bravo. A good example of this is actually Miami down in South Florida. Their Bravo is very shallow. So if you didn't know that, that could change things when you're actually doing your flight planning. You may actually want to go lower or higher. All these things we need to take into account when we're doing our flight planning.
If you're looking into a sectional chart, you can spot the Class Bravo airspace by its solid blue lines with different layers labeled by numbers which indicate the base and ceiling of that Bravo airspace. Class Charlie, on the other hand, is marked by a solid magenta line with the inner and outer rings. These rings also include numbers which depict area altitude limits. If you are ever in doubt about airspace you are in or near, check the VFR sectional chart before you fly.
When it comes to talking to air traffic control, Class Bravo has strict regulations. First, you must have established two-way radio communication with that controller. And also, and here's the most important part, you have to have clearance to enter that Bravo airspace. You specifically need to hear you are cleared into the Class Bravo. No clearance, no entry. Class Charlie airspace is a little more relaxed. You just need to establish two-way radio communication with air traffic control. That means if air traffic control acknowledges you by saying your call sign, you're good to enter. But remember, just by calling them does not mean you have established two-way radio communication. They need to respond with your call sign for you to enter their airspace.
Class Bravo uses radar services with full ATC clearance and separation from other aircraft, both VFR and IFR. Class Bravo is very busy with fast-moving aircraft, which means you need to be continuously scanning for other aircraft even when communicating with ATC. Class Charlie also has radar services when flying within Class Charlie airspace. Radar service is also offered if you're flying in that Class Charlie's outer area, which is up to 20 miles from that airport, but is an optional service.
Avionics can play a big role in airspace requirements. In Class Bravo, ADS-B out is required inside and even above their airspace. Plus, there's a mode C veil extending 30 nautical miles around the main airport, meaning ADS-B is required here too.
Remember that ADS-B is also required above Class C airspace.
The regulation states that above the ceiling and within the lateral boundaries of Class B or Class C airspace, up to 10,000 feet ADS-B is required.
And as for who can fly there, Class Bravo has stricter requirements. You need to be at least a private pilot or student pilot with an endorsement specified for that Bravo airspace within the last 90 days. Class Charlie, no special certification required. Even student pilots can enter without an additional endorsement. Finally, let's talk weather. Class Bravo is pretty easy to remember. You need to have at least 3 statute mile visibility and must remain clear of the clouds. Easy, right? Class Charlie is a little bit more specific. You must maintain at least 3 statute miles visibility, 1,000 feet above the clouds, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet horizontal separation. So if you're flying VFR, pay close attention to that weather before you enter the Class Charlie.
Before flying in either Bravo or Charlie, be sure to review and understand all the rules that you must follow so that you continue being a safer and a smarter pilot. And one last tip for you, keep a current VFR sectional out and available to refer to while flying. Paper or digital, either way, they're really good to help maintain good situational awareness. So MzeroA Nation, have you flown into a Bravo airspace? What about a Charlie airspace? Let us know in the comments below, and remember, a good pilot is always learning.